In the glittering world of royalty, where every smile is measured and every secret is guarded, one truth has broken free and shaken the palace to its core. A revelation has surfaced that threatens to tear apart reputations and reignite the memory of a princess the world refuses to forget. What began as quiet murmurs among the staff has now spiraled into a scandal with Camilla at the center of the storm. When Princess Anne uncovers the shocking evidence, she is forced to make a choice that could forever alter the balance of royal power. Loyalties crack, tempers erupt, and Diana's legacy rises to demand justice. Join us now as we expose how Camilla was thrown out after Anne discovered she sold Diana's belongings. Subscribe today and be part of the royal investigation, the shocking discovery. The corridors of the palace were unusually quiet that morning. Princess Anne had risen earlier than usual, intent on reviewing a series of estate documents that had been delivered discreetly the night before. With her usual discipline, she sat in her private study, the soft rustle of parchment echoing through the stillness. At first, the records appeared ordinary, a routine inventory of stored assets and archived items. Yet as she turned one page after another, her eyes froze upon something that made her blood run cold. There, in black and white, were receipts detailing the sale of personal belongings once owned by Diana, the late Princess of Wales. Anne's heart pounded as she leaned closer, disbelief clouding her mind. These were not simple items of little value, nor were they overlooked trinkets forgotten by history. They were treasures with deep personal and emotional meaning. Dresses Diana had worn at iconic events, handwritten notes, and even jewelry that had been carefully safeguarded within palace walls. Each receipt was stamped with confirmation that these pieces had been exchanged for money and transferred discreetly into private collections. For Anne, the shock was immediate and unbearable. She knew Diana's legacy was sacred, a legacy that should have been preserved with honor. As she flipped through the pile of documents, Anne's expression darkened. The dates, the signatures, and the coded references left no doubt in her mind that this was deliberate. The belongings had not simply vanished by mistake. They had been deliberately sold, hidden under layers of bureaucratic paperwork to avoid scrutiny. The realization hit her like a storm. Someone within the royal circle had orchestrated this betrayal, and that betrayal cut to the heart of Diana's memory. The study suddenly felt smaller, its air thick with tension. Anne stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floor. She pressed her hand firmly on the desk, trying to steady herself. In that instant, her thoughts turned to Diana's sons. How would they react if they discovered that the belongings of their beloved mother had been scattered and sold in secret? The anger inside Anne grew, fed by the injustice of what she had uncovered. Determination replaced shock as she began connecting the dots. Whoever had engineered this scheme had access to highly restricted storage, and they had carefully covered their tracks. That level of access meant the involvement of someone close, someone with both influence and confidence that their actions would go unnoticed. For Anne, the betrayal was not only personal, but also an insult to the dignity of the monarchy. Diana had been more than a royal figure. She had been a symbol of compassion, adored by millions across the world. To see her belongings treated as mere commodities was unthinkable. Anne gathered the receipts together, her fingers trembling but her resolve unshaken. She knew this discovery would ignite conflict within the family, yet she also knew it was her duty to protect Diana's memory. The stage was set for confrontation, and Anne was ready to uncover who had dared to profit from the belongings of the people's princess. The silent palace whispers. The grandeur of the palace often masked the quiet hum of activity that unfolded behind its walls. While the royal family carried out their duties with poise before the world, the staff moved like shadows, tending to the details that kept the institution alive. Within this hidden world of butlers, maids, and attendants, whispers began to circulate, whispers that no official record could silence. It started as murmurs exchanged during late-night shifts, small observations that seemed harmless at first but slowly grew into a troubling pattern. Servants who handled storage inventories noticed certain jewelry pieces missing from their designated cases. A seamstress, familiar with Diana's iconic gowns, remarked that one or two dresses were no longer where they should have been. A junior footman recalled carrying sealed packages to waiting vehicles at odd hours, told only that they were for official purposes. Each incident on its own might have passed unnoticed, yet when pieced together in hushed conversations, they formed a puzzle that suggested something sinister. The staff, long accustomed to silence and discretion, found themselves caught between duty and conscience. Diana had been adored not only by the public, but by those who served her. She had treated them with warmth and humanity, leaving behind memories that outshone her royal title. For these men and women, the thought of her belongings being mishandled or sold in secrecy was unbearable. In quiet corridors and tucked-away servants' quarters, they asked one another the question that lingered in the air: who would dare tamper with the possessions of the people's princess? The whispers grew stronger as more evidence surfaced. A chamberlain confided that official ledgers had been altered, pages removed and rewritten with suspicious neatness. An archivist, accustomed to cataloging royal items, noticed gaps in records that had always been precise. These inconsistencies gnawed at the conscience of those who worked closest to the royal treasures. They knew something was wrong, but they also knew the danger of speaking too loudly. Within the palace, secrets were currency, and exposing the wrong one could end a career or worse, invite retaliation. Despite the risks, the loyalty of the staff to Diana's memory began to outweigh their fear. Some spoke of how she had comforted them in moments of hardship, remembering names and faces that others overlooked. The idea that her legacy was being violated turned their unease into quiet defiance. Though their words never rose above a whisper, they carried the weight of devotion. It was their way of defending the honor of the woman who had once been their light in the palace's cold halls. As the rumors spread, tension settled over the household like a heavy cloak. Even those who pretended not to notice felt the chill of suspicion. Every missing item, every locked door, every discreet delivery now seemed suspect. The question remained unanswered, but its presence was undeniable. Who within the royal circle had crossed the line and dared to touch what should have remained untouchable? The whispers carried through the palace, building pressure for a revelation that could not be contained forever. Camilla under the spotlight. As the whispers inside the palace thickened and suspicions grew heavier, attention gradually shifted toward one figure who had long stood at the center of both admiration and controversy. Camilla, who had carefully woven her public image into one of stability and acceptance over the years, now found herself under an unrelenting glare. It began with subtle connections unearthed by discreet investigators and palace aides determined to trace the origin of the scandal. Receipts and documents pointed toward hidden auctions, exclusive events attended only by the wealthiest collectors. Among the names that emerged, a few were disturbingly close to Camilla's inner circle. These were not random acquaintances. They were individuals who had long shared private dinners and confidential conversations with her. Some had been seen attending intimate gatherings away from the public eye, where deals were often struck far from scrutiny. One such collector, known for his interest in royal memorabilia, was revealed to have obtained several of Diana's personal items. When questioned about their origin, his answers were evasive, but the trail of money and signatures hinted strongly at a familiar hand guiding the transactions. The palace staff, who once whispered quietly, now spoke with sharper certainty. Stories circulated of couriers entering through side entrances, carrying parcels marked with seals that few would dare question. Attendants recalled overhearing Camilla's closest confidants discussing the rising demand for pieces tied to Diana's memory. For many, these memories fused together into a pattern too glaring to ignore. Each detail built a case that cast Camilla into the harshest light. Publicly, she maintained her composed appearance, attending events with the same grace expected of her position. Yet behind closed doors, the pressure was unmistakable. Anne's discovery of the receipts had already sparked unrest, and now the evidence spreading among the palace's corridors placed Camilla at the very center of blame. Her carefully cultivated reputation as a figure of loyalty to Charles and as a stabilizing presence in the monarchy began to unravel thread by thread. The public perception of Camilla had always been a delicate balance. Years of effort had softened her image, portraying her as a woman who had weathered storms and found acceptance. But the thought of her being linked to the sale of Diana's personal belongings ignited outrage in ways that words could barely capture. Diana remained the people's princess, immortalized in the hearts of millions. To betray her memory by reducing her possessions to mere commodities was seen not as a mistake, but as a profound act of disrespect. As speculation spread beyond palace walls, journalists began to circle, eager to uncover the truth. Reports of private auctions and shadowy collectors soon reached the press. Though names were not initially revealed, the insinuations were enough to ignite suspicion. The spotlight grew harsher, shining directly on Camilla. Every move she made was scrutinized, every smile dissected, every word weighed for signs of guilt. In that unforgiving light, her image began to crumble. Once shielded by the walls of the palace and the loyalty of those around her, she now stood vulnerable, accused by whispers that had grown into a chorus. The mounting evidence left little room for denial, and for the first time Camilla's position felt perilously unstable. Anne's unstoppable fury. The palace was tense with an unspoken storm, but no one was prepared for the eruption that came when Princess Anne finally confronted Camilla. For days, Anne had carried the weight of the receipts and the knowledge of Diana's belongings being sold in secrecy. Each passing hour had only added to her anger, until it boiled into something unstoppable. When the two women found themselves in the same room, Anne wasted no time with pleasantries. Her voice cut through the air like a blade, sharp and unyielding, demanding answers that Camilla could no longer evade. Camilla attempted to maintain her composure, the same mask she had perfected for public appearances. Yet, before Anne's fury, even her calm facade began to falter. Anne's words struck with precision, fueled by loyalty to Diana's memory and a fierce desire to protect the integrity of the monarchy. She accused Camilla of betraying not only the family, but also the millions who still cherished the late princess. Anne's tone carried the weight of authority, her presence unshaken by the possibility of conflict. The exchange quickly became fiery. Voices raised as emotions that had long been buried came to the surface. Anne spoke of Diana as more than a sister-in-law. To her, Diana had been a beloved friend and a symbol of compassion that the monarchy could ill afford to lose. Selling her belongings was not merely a financial scheme. It was, in Anne's eyes, an act of desecration against a woman whose legacy still breathed life into the hearts of the people. Camilla, cornered by Anne's relentless accusations, tried to deflect. She argued that misunderstandings had clouded the truth, that not all trails led directly to her, but Anne would not be swayed. Her fury was rooted not only in the evidence before her, but in years of quiet rivalry and unspoken resentments. She had watched as Camilla rose in influence, and though she had held her tongue for the sake of family unity, this betrayal was the final line crossed. The confrontation laid bare the deep-rooted tensions that had always lingered beneath the surface. Anne's loyalty to Diana was unshakable, and she made it clear that she would not allow Camilla to tarnish what little remained of the princess's legacy. With every word, Anne's conviction grew stronger. She spoke as the voice of truth, as the guardian of a memory too precious to be traded for profit. By the end of their exchange, the air in the room was thick with hostility. Camilla had no victory in this battle, for Anne's fury was unstoppable. It was not the kind of rage that burned quickly and faded. It was the enduring fire of righteousness, fueled by love, loyalty, and duty. Anne left no doubt in Camilla's mind that her actions had consequences and that the royal family would not be shielded from the truth. The palace walls had heard many arguments, but few carried the force of Anne's fury. It was a moment that shifted the balance of power, drawing a line that could never again be crossed. Anne had spoken, and her words echoed like thunder, declaring her refusal to let betrayal define the family name. The ghost of Diana. The palace corridors may have been filled with present turmoil, but in the hearts of the people and within the echoes of memory, Diana still reigned. Her presence lingered like a spirit that could never be silenced. and with every whisper of scandal, her name returned to the center of the story. Diana had not been an ordinary royal figure. She had been the embodiment of compassion, the shining light who reached beyond protocol to touch lives with authenticity. To speak of her belongings was to speak of fragments of history that carried deep emotional value, treasures that could never be measured in wealth. Her gowns were more than elegant fabric stitched with perfection. Each dress told a story of moments that had captured the world's gaze. The shimmering blue gown she wore as she danced with John Travolta at the White House had become a timeless image of grace. Her iconic wedding dress, with its endless train of silk and lace, symbolized both hope and heartbreak. Even the simplest jewelry pieces she had worn carried meaning, reminders of a woman who turned formality into warmth. These items were not possessions to be traded. They were sacred relics of the people's princess, each carrying memories too powerful to be reduced to commodities. Her handwritten notes revealed more than royal etiquette. They displayed her tenderness, her humor, and her humanity. A small message to a staff member, a thank you written in her distinct script, became treasures for those fortunate enough to have received them. To lose such items to secretive sales was more than theft. It was the attempted erasure of the bond Diana had shared with the world. Her ghost was not one of fear but of remembrance, a reminder that she still lived in the collective heart of her people. Outside the palace walls, Diana remained untouchable. Crowds continued to leave flowers at memorials. Documentaries revisited her life with reverence, and generations who had never seen her in person spoke of her as though she had always been part of their lives. The power of her legacy was that it transcended time, reaching both those who had known her and those who had only heard of her compassion. She stood forever as the people's princess, a symbol of love that the monarchy itself often struggled to embody. It was this enduring presence that made the scandal surrounding her belongings so unthinkable. To exploit Diana's memory by turning her treasures into profit was to betray not only her but also the millions who had trusted her with their admiration. The ghost of Diana demanded respect, and her legacy served as a reminder that her spirit could not be sold, hidden, or forgotten. In the minds of the public and within the silent fury of Anne, Diana's belongings represented something greater than wealth. They represented the bond between a princess and her people, a bond so sacred that to break it would risk shattering the very trust the monarchy sought to preserve. The ghost of Diana hovered, untouchable, ensuring that her legacy remained stronger than any attempt to diminish it. The power struggle. Behind the gilded doors of the palace, the atmosphere grew heavy with conflict. What had begun as whispers among staff and suspicions unearthed by Anne now erupted into a full-blown confrontation between factions of the royal family. The scandal surrounding Diana's belongings was no longer a secret confined to dusty ledgers and hushed voices. It had become a matter that divided the very heart of the monarchy. Those who stood loyal to Diana's memory refused to let the betrayal be buried, while others sought to shield Camilla from the storm that threatened to consume her. Charles, torn between his duty as monarch and his loyalty as a husband, made his choice swiftly. He positioned himself firmly at Camilla's side, determined to protect her reputation from collapse. In meetings behind closed doors, he spoke with controlled authority, urging restraint and reminding his siblings of the dangers of letting private family disputes spill into the public arena. To Charles, the scandal was not only a personal crisis, but a potential threat to the stability of the crown itself. Shielding Camilla, in his view, meant shielding the monarchy from further humiliation. Anne, however, refused to yield. Her fury at the desecration of Diana's memory burned too fiercely to be quieted by pleas for unity. She gathered allies among the family and the trusted few who had adored Diana in life. They shared her conviction that justice must prevail and that Camilla's actions could not be overlooked. For Anne, this was not simply a family quarrel. It was a matter of principle, a battle for truth and honor in a house that had too often chosen silence over accountability. Tension thickened as each side clashed in strategy. Charles argued for discretion, framing the matter as a misunderstanding that could be resolved without scandal. Anne countered with the receipts, the testimonies of staff, and the undeniable evidence that Diana's belongings had been deliberately sold. The more Charles pressed for compromise, the more Anne stood her ground. Her voice rang with defiance, echoing through rooms where once only measured tones were heard. The palace, once a fortress of unity, now found itself divided into camps. Some courtiers, fearful of instability, aligned with Charles, believing that shielding Camilla would prevent greater damage to the monarchy. Others, emboldened by Anne's passion, whispered their support for her cause, convinced that protecting Diana's memory was not only noble but necessary for the crown's survival in the eyes of the public. The struggle extended beyond personal loyalty. It became a clash of values, pitting preservation of image against the demand for truth. Behind every closed meeting door, the conflict grew louder, even when spoken in restrained voices. Every glance carried suspicion, every silence held weight. The royal family had faced scandals before, yet this one was different. It touched the legacy of Diana, a figure whose ghost still commanded more loyalty from the public than any living royal could hope to claim. The power struggle revealed fractures that had long existed but rarely surfaced. Anne's refusal to bow and Charles's determination to defend Camilla transformed the palace into a battleground of wills. And in that battle, the monarchy itself stood at risk of being reshaped by the memory of the woman who continued to cast her shadow across its walls. The royal showdown. The call for a family meeting sent ripples of unease through the palace. It was rare for the royals to gather under such strained circumstances, and even rarer when the matter at hand threatened to fracture their unity. Yet the scandal of Diana's belongings demanded a reckoning. Invitations were sent with urgency, and one by one, key figures assembled in the Grand Chamber, a room steeped in history where countless decisions had shaped the course of the monarchy. This time, however, the matter was not of state, but of betrayal within their own circle. The atmosphere was tense as the meeting began. The walls, adorned with portraits of ancestors, seemed to bear silent witness to the unfolding drama. Charles sat at the head, his face set in solemn determination. Beside him, Camilla kept her composure, though her eyes betrayed the weight of the accusations looming over her. Across from them, Anne entered with the evidence she had gathered, her presence commanding and her resolve unshaken. The room bristled with tension, every royal aware that the confrontation could not be softened by diplomacy. Anne wasted no time. With precision and clarity, she laid the receipts on the polished table, her voice sharp as she recounted the details of the sales. She spoke of the missing gowns, the vanished jewelry, and the personal letters that had been reduced to commodities. Her words carried the anger of the staff who had whispered their suspicions, and the sorrow of the public who still revered Diana's memory. Each sentence was a blade cutting through the fragile veil of silence that others had tried to maintain. Camilla attempted to interject, but Anne's fury drowned her out. The princess made it clear that this was not a misunderstanding nor a trivial matter. To her, the betrayal was unforgivable. She turned directly to her brother, demanding to know how he could defend actions that desecrated the legacy of the woman who had given so much of herself to the monarchy and the people. Charles bristled, defending Camilla with measured words, insisting that no conclusion could yet be drawn. But Anne would not allow the discussion to be diluted by excuses. The tension in the room exploded. Voices were raised, and the weight of unspoken resentments poured into the open. Siblings who had long harbored private grievances found themselves drawn into the battle. Some pleaded for calm, while others nodded in quiet agreement with Anne's unflinching stance. The divisions within the family grew clearer with every passing moment, exposing fault lines that could not easily be repaired. Anne's final words silenced the chamber. She declared with unshakable conviction that Camilla had no place in the palace after betraying Diana's memory. Her voice, steady and fierce, left no room for compromise. For Anne, this was a line that could never be crossed again. The family was forced to confront the reality that unity was slipping through their fingers, and the ghost of Diana had once again risen to test their integrity. The royal showdown ended not with resolution, but with a chilling silence. The accusations had been laid bare, the fury unmasked, and the future of Camilla within the palace hung by a thread. The monarchy, shaken by its own divisions, would never be the same after that day. Camilla thrown out, The day of reckoning arrived sooner than anyone in the palace had anticipated. After weeks of mounting pressure, heated confrontations, and the unrelenting determination of Princess Anne, a final decision was reached. Camilla, once carefully integrated into the royal fold, was cast out from her duties. The announcement, though delivered with formal restraint, carried the weight of scandal that no carefully chosen words could soften. For the first time, the monarchy publicly distanced itself from her, and the image she had spent years constructing crumbled in an instant. When the news broke, the tabloids erupted with sensational headlines. Front pages screamed of betrayal, of sacred belongings sold, and of the furious confrontation that had toppled one of the most controversial figures in modern royal history. Photographs of Camilla leaving the palace circulated widely, her expression caught between defiance and despair. The once warm receptions she had received at official events were replaced by glares of disapproval, her presence now viewed as a stain upon the crown. The public reaction was immediate and intense. For some, the decision to remove Camilla from royal duties was long overdue, a form of justice for the late Diana, whose memory remained untouchable. Supporters of Anne praised her courage and her loyalty, lauding her as the protector of Diana's legacy. For others, however, the move was jarring, a reminder that the royal family remained divided and prone to implosions that damaged their credibility. The nation split into two voices, one calling for accountability, the other for unity at any cost. Within the palace walls, the fallout was devastating. Charles stood isolated, his defense of Camilla rendered powerless by the overwhelming evidence and the unshakable will of his sister. The tension between him and Anne deepened, becoming a fracture that no formal statements could repair. Camilla herself retreated from the public eye, her reputation battered beyond recognition. Invitations to state functions were quietly rescinded, her name gradually removed from official schedules. The woman who had once shared the spotlight with the monarch now found herself banished to the margins, her influence stripped away. The international media seized upon the scandal with fervor. Documentaries replayed Diana's life, juxtaposed with the betrayal of her belongings. News anchors spoke of the irony that even in death, Diana's presence overshadowed those who sought to replace her. The ghost of the people's princess had risen once more, her memory powerful enough to unseat her rival decades after her passing. For the public, the spectacle was both shocking and captivating. Crowds gathered outside royal residences, some cheering in approval of the decision, others questioning how far the family could fracture before breaking entirely. The monarchy, already a fragile institution in the eyes of many, now stood at a crossroads. Camilla's downfall symbolized more than personal disgrace. It reflected the deep and unresolved wounds that Diana's absence had left behind. Camilla being thrown out was more than a headline. It was the climax of a battle between loyalty and betrayal, between memory and ambition. Her removal from royal duties marked the devastating collapse of an image that had taken years to build, leaving behind only the lingering reminder that Diana's shadow still defined the destiny of the crown. Diana's legacy restored. In the aftermath of scandal and division, the royal family moved to repair the damage and reclaim what had been lost. The belongings of Diana, scattered through hidden sales and secretive auctions, were painstakingly traced and retrieved. Each item carried with it the story of a woman who had touched the world with grace, compassion, and authenticity. The dresses, the jewelry, and the handwritten notes were no longer vulnerable to exploitation. Instead, they were safeguarded with the reverence they deserved, preserved as enduring symbols of a princess whose memory refused to fade. Princess Anne stood at the center of this restoration. Her unyielding pursuit of justice and her refusal to allow Diana's name to be tarnished elevated her to a new role within the family. She was no longer just a royal figure carrying out duties. She had become the guardian of Diana's legacy. The voice that ensured her sister-in-law's spirit was honored and her memory untouchable. In the eyes of the public, Anne emerged as a heroine, a defender of the people's princess when betrayal threatened to silence her story. The retrieval of the belongings was more than a logistical achievement. It was an act of healing. For the public, who had mourned Diana with tears and flowers for decades, The knowledge that her treasures were back in safe hands was deeply comforting. Museums and memorials began to speak once again of her life through the artifacts that represented her humanity. Dresses she had worn at moments of global admiration became exhibitions of history. Jewelry once close to her heart was displayed with reverence, carrying not only beauty but also the emotional weight of remembrance. The people responded with renewed devotion. Crowds gathered at memorial sites, leaving tributes in Diana's honor, not with grief but with gratitude. They saw in Anne's actions the reflection of Diana's own spirit, the same determination to stand for truth and compassion no matter the cost. The bond between Diana and the public, unbroken even by death, grew stronger as her memory was reaffirmed. Anne's role as protector solidified that bond, bridging the gap between royalty and people in a way few had achieved since Diana herself. As the scandal receded into history, the focus shifted from betrayal to restoration. The royal family, though shaken, acknowledged the importance of what had been preserved. Diana's story became not one of loss, but of resilience. Her ghost no longer lingered in sorrow, but in triumph, a reminder that her influence could not be diminished. Even in absence, she continued to shape the monarchy, her presence guiding its course and demanding its integrity. The documentary closes with a powerful reflection. Diana may be gone, but her spirit lives on in every heart that remembers her compassion, her kindness, and her courage. Her belongings, now safeguarded, serve as more than artifacts. They are sacred links between a princess and her people. The message is clear and enduring. Diana's legacy is restored, her memory untouchable, and her spirit still shaping the destiny of the crown. Diana's story does not end with her passing, nor with the scandals that sought to cloud her memory. Her spirit endures in the love of the people, in the compassion she embodied, and in the legacy that no betrayal could erase. Anne's unwavering stand reminds us that truth and honor will always prevail, even within the most guarded walls of power. The belongings of Diana are not just possessions. They are timeless reminders of a princess who gave her heart to the world. What do you think about this story? Please share your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, do not let it end here. Subscribe now. Join us for more untold royal revelations, and keep the memory of the people's princess alive. Her spirit still speaks, and so must we.